Most people are convinced that growing your own fruit means owning land. A proper orchard, rows of full-size trees, and years of patient waiting before a single apple ever lands in your palm. I believed that too, for the longest time. But here is what I learned after years of growing food on a small patio with nothing but a handful of pots and a watering can. A well-chosen dwarf tree in a container will often fruit sooner, ripen cleaner, and ask far less of you than a big tree stuck in the ground ever could. That is the quiet truth that changed everything for me, and it is what this whole video is built on. I want to walk you through 15 dwarf fruit trees that are genuinely forgiving, genuinely productive, and perfect to start this July, even if you have never grown a tree in your life. And I am saving the best for last, because the number one tree on this list actually fruits better when you treat it in a way that feels completely wrong. Most people baby it. I stopped, and it rewarded me. Stay with me, and I will hand you that little secret near the end. Before we begin, do me one small favor. Drop a comment and tell me just one thing. The rough climate where you live, warm, mild, or cold, and the one fruit you have always dreamed of, picking from your own pot. I read these, and it helps me point people in the right direction. Now let me pour us both a slow morning, and let us start. Let us begin at number 15, the dwarf apple. Now most beginners assume apples are the hardest fruit to grow, that they demand cold winters, sprays, and a whole second tree for pollination. What surprised me is how tidy a dwarf apple becomes when its roots are boxed into a pot. The magic is not the top of the tree at all, it is the rootstock underneath. Trees grafted onto a dwarfing rootstock. The ones nurseries label as Malling 27 or Geneva 65 are genetically told to stay small, and that same signal pushes them to make flower buds years earlier than a full-size tree. A standard apple can make you wait 7 or 8 years for a real crop. A dwarf apple in a pot can hand you fruit in its second or third season. I grow mine in a container about the size of a 15-gallon pot, filled with a free-draining mix, and I give it at least 6 hours of direct sun. The one thing I learned the hard way is that most apples need a pollination partner, so either grow 2 different varieties or choose a self-fertile type. Keep the soil evenly moist, never soggy, and you will be shocked how much a knee-high tree can carry. But apples taught me patience, and the next tree taught me the opposite lesson entirely. At number 14 is the dwarf pear, and here is the reframe that took me by surprise. Pears have a reputation for being slow and fussy, but in a pot, a dwarf pear is one of the steadiest, most low-drama trees I have ever grown. Pears actually prefer a slightly heavier, more moisture-retentive soil than apples, which means the forgiving nature of a large container suits them beautifully. The tree cannot dry out into a cracked mess the way ground soil does in a July heat wave, because you control every drop. I use a 12 to 15-gallon pot, a good peat-free compost blended with a little added grit, and I water deeply 2 or 3 times a week in high summer, letting the top inch dry between drinks. Choose a variety grafted on a quince rootstock for the smallest size. Like apples, most pears fruit far better with a partner nearby, so if you have room for 2, do it. What I love is that a potted pear rarely suffers the disease pressure of a big garden tree, because good airflow around a raised container keeps the leaves dry. And dry leaves, as you will hear again and again today, are the quiet secret behind healthy fruit. Now, if you think stone fruit is out of reach on a balcony, The next one will change your mind. Number 13 is the dwarf cherry, and this is the tree that people are the most nervous about, because cherries in the old imagination are enormous, towering things that only the birds ever get to enjoy. But there are naturally compact, self-fertile cherries now, varieties like Stella and its compact forms that will fruit on a tree you can prune with hand shears while standing flat-footed. Self-fertile is the key phrase because it means you need only one tree to get cherries. The reason a pot works so well is control. Cherries hate wet feet, and a raised container with good drainage keeps the roots from drowning in the exact way heavy garden clay tends to kill them. I grow mine in about a 15-gallon pot in a gritty, free-draining mix. And here is the trick I wish someone had told me. When the fruit begins to color, throw a light net over the whole tree. A potted cherry is small enough to net completely, which means you, not the birds, get the harvest. That single move took me from losing everything to picking bowls of cherries. But cherries need a real winter chill, and the next tree is for those of you in warmer places who thought stone fruit was off the table. At number 12, we come to the dwarf peach, and specifically the genetic dwarf types like Bonanza, and this one genuinely delighted me. Most people assume a peach tree needs to be big to be worth it, but a genetic dwarf peach stays naturally around 4 to 6 feet tall its entire life, with fruit of full, normal size. It is not a stunted tree. It is a small tree that produces regular peaches, which feels almost like a trick the first time you see it. Peaches are self-fertile, so one tree is a complete orchard. The container advantage here is enormous because peaches are prone to a disease called peach leaf curl, and the biggest cause is cold spring rain sitting on the emerging buds. When your tree lives in a pot, you can simply wheel it under an eave or a covered porch during those wet late winter weeks and roll it back out when the weather turns. That mobility alone can save an entire crop. I keep mine in a 15-gallon pot in full sun, feed it through the growing season, and thin the young fruit so each remaining peach has room to swell. But if peaches feel like the flashy cousin, its smoother sibling is next, and it is even easier. Number 11 is the dwarf nectarine, and the reframe here is simple. People think a nectarine is somehow more delicate than a peach, more likely to fail. In truth, a nectarine is just a peach without the fuzz. The same tree biology, the same care, and there are genetic dwarf nectarines that behave exactly like their peach cousins in a pot. What surprised me most is how much sweeter homegrown nectarines taste, because you let them ripen fully on the tree instead of picking them hard for shipping the way stores must. That full ripening is only possible when the tree is yours and close at hand. I treat mine identically to the peach. A large pot, gritty, free-draining soil, 6 or more hours of sun, and the same winter shelter from cold rain to dodge leaf curl. Thin the fruit in early summer so you get fewer but larger nectarines. And keep the airflow open around the pot, because crowding is where fungal trouble begins. So far, every tree on this list has been about controlling what nature normally throws at you. The next few are about something even better, growing fruit that most people are told they cannot grow at all. At number 10 is the calamandan, a small, endlessly productive citrus. And this is where the whole idea of a pot really starts to shine. Most people believe you need a warm climate to grow citrus. What I found is that you need a pot and a doorway. A calamandan fruits almost continuously, covering itself in small tart oranges, perfect for cooking, marmalade, and drinks. and it stays naturally compact and shrubby. Because it lives in a container, you grow it outside in the warm months and simply carry it indoors near a bright window before the first frost. That single ability to move the whole tree is what lets someone in a cold region grow fruit that supposedly only belongs in the tropics. I use a 10 to 14 gallon pot with a free draining citrus or cactus style mix, because citrus roots absolutely despise sitting in water. Water when the top inch or two feels dry, and feed with a citrus fertilizer during the growing season. The University of Florida notes that container citrus needs consistent moisture and excellent drainage above almost everything else. And once I got that balance right, my calamandine never stopped giving. But if a tart cooking citrus is not what you dreamed of, the next one is the fruit that sells this entire hobby to people. Number 9 is the Meyer lemon. And honestly, if I could only keep one potted tree, this might be it. Here is the myth I want to gently break. People think lemons are difficult and slow. The Meyer lemon, which is a cross between a lemon and a mandarin, is self-fertile, fruits young, and produces sweeter, thinner-skinned lemons than anything you will find in a shop. A single potted Meyer can hand you dozens of lemons a year while staying small enough to live on a patio. The reason a container works so perfectly is that citrus is shallow-rooted and craves warmth at the roots and sharp drainage, both of which a raised pot delivers naturally. I grow mine in a 12-gallon pot in a gritty free-draining mix in the brightest spot I have, and I water deeply, then let the surface dry before the next drink. The most common mistake I see, and the one I made myself, is overwatering out of love, which yellows the leaves and rots the roots. Ease off, and the tree perks up within weeks. In cold regions, bring it in for winter near a south-facing window. But citrus loves to sprawl a little, so let me show you one that stays impossibly neat. At number 8 is the kumquat. And here is where I want to speak directly to two people watching. If you already have a big in-ground garden and you are thinking none of this container talk applies to you, and equally if you are a nervous beginner, sure that trees are beyond you, this little tree is for both of you. The kumquat is one of the most cold, hardy citrus you can grow. It stays naturally small and dense, and you eat the whole fruit, skin and all, sweet rind around tart flesh. Here is the thing you can do this very weekend with no special equipment, whether you garden in acres or on a windowsill. Take any fruit tree or shrub you already own in the ground or in a pot, and simply check its drainage by watering it and watching how fast the water disappears. If it pools for more than a few minutes, work some grit or coarse compost into the surface, and for potted plants, lift the pot onto a couple of small feet or bricks so water can escape freely. That one free adjustment, better drainage, is the single biggest thing separating thriving fruit from struggling fruit, and it applies to the master gardener and the first timer exactly the same. The kumquat taught me that because it sulks the moment its feet stay wet and glows the moment they drain. That lesson, less space, more fruit, is something I spent years piecing together, one season at a time. And if you want all of it in one place, I put everything into a book. It is called The Container Harvest, and it walks you through exactly how to set up, plant, feed, and harvest from potted fruit trees, from the very first pot to a genuinely productive little orchard on a patio. If you want the complete system in one place, the link is in the description below. But let us keep moving, because the trees in the top half of this list are where things get really interesting. Number 7 is the dwarf pomegranate, and this one surprises people because they picture pomegranates as desert giants. There is a naturally dwarf pomegranate, often sold as Nana, that stays around 3 feet, blooms with brilliant orange-red flowers all summer, and sets small edible fruit, all while being one of the most drought-tolerant trees on this entire list. That drought tolerance is a gift for busy people, because a pomegranate would far rather you forget to water it than fuss over it. It is self-fertile, so one plant is enough, and it actually thrives in the confined, warm root zone a pot provides. I use a 10-gallon pot with a free draining mix, put it in the hottest, sunniest corner I have, and water only when the soil has genuinely dried down. In cold climates, it drops its leaves and rests over winter, and you can move it somewhere sheltered and barely water it until spring. It is the tree for the person who is honest about being forgetful. But if you want the single most rewarding fruit for a beginner, the one that made me feel like I had a real green thumb, it is coming up next. At number 6 is the fig, and I am placing it here on the list, but I promise you it connects to the very biggest secret I am saving for the end, so keep it in mind. Most people think figs are exotic and fragile. In reality, a fig is one of the toughest, most generous trees a beginner can own, and it is perfectly built for a pot. Figs are self-fertile, they fruit young, and many varieties give you 2 crops in a good season. They ripen sweet only when picked fully ripe from your own tree, which is why store figs never taste like much. I grow mine in a large pot in full baking sun because heat is what sweetens the fruit. Water regularly while the figs are swelling, and in cold regions move the dormant tree into a shed or garage for winter, where it needs almost no attention at all. The fig is proof that generosity and toughness can live in the same plant. But before I reveal why the fig is secretly happiest under a little stress, let me give you the small fruit that outperforms trees 10 times its size. Number 5 is the dwarf blueberry. And this is where the pot does not just help, it is genuinely better than the ground. Here is the reframe that matters. Most people who fail with blueberries blame the plant, but the real culprit is soil pH. Blueberries demand acidic soil, roughly 4.5 to 5.5 on the pH scale, and most garden soil is simply too alkaline for them to feed properly, which is why they languish and fade in the ground. In a pot, you fill it with an acidic, ericaceous mix from the start, and you have handed the plant exactly the home it needs. Compact varieties like Top Hat stay under 2 feet and still cover themselves in berries. I grow mine in acidic potting mix, water with rainwater when I can because tap water is often alkaline and slowly nudges the pH the wrong way, and I keep the soil consistently moist since blueberry roots are shallow and fine. Give them full sun for the sweetest berries. This is the clearest example on the whole list of a pot letting you build a perfect little world that the open ground could never offer. But if berries are not quite a tree enough for you, the next one is an ancient classic that has never been easier. At number 4 is the dwarf olive. And yes, you really can grow and even harvest olives from a pot. People assume olives need a Mediterranean hillside, but an olive tree is naturally slow, drought-loving, and perfectly content with its roots restricted, which makes it almost purpose-built for container life. A potted olive stays small and elegant, and certain varieties are reliable, self-fertile fruiters. The beauty is the same theme running through this whole list. An olive fears wet roots and cold winters, and a pot solves both, because you control the drainage and you can move the tree to shelter when the weather turns harsh. I use a free draining gritty mix, a generous pot, and the sunniest spot available, and I water sparingly, letting it dry well between drinks. Overwatering is the only real way to harm it. Even if you never cure a single olive to eat, The silvery tree itself is a calm, beautiful thing to live alongside, and that quiet pleasure is half of why we grow anything at all. But now we climb into the top 3, and these are the trees I reach for first when a friend tells me they are afraid to start. Number 3 is the dwarf plum, and here is the gentle surprise. People think plums are big, sprawling orchard trees, but there are dwarf plums and even self-fertile varieties like Victoria that fruit heavily on a compact, container-friendly frame. Plums are among the most forgiving stone fruits, less prone to the leaf curl that troubles peaches, and a self-fertile variety means one tree is all you need. The pot gives you the same advantages we keep returning to: sharp drainage that plum roots love, and the ability to net the tree against birds and wasps as the fruit ripens. I grow mine in a 15-gallon pot in a free-draining mix. Water deeply and regularly while the fruit is swelling, and thin the young plums so the branches are not overloaded and the remaining fruit grows large and sweet. A tree you can walk around, prune by hand, and net in 5 minutes is a tree that actually gives you its harvest instead of losing it. But my second favorite, the one I recommend to absolutely everyone who says they kill every plant they touch, is next. At number 2 is the dwarf mulberry, and specifically the ever-bearing dwarf types that stay shrub-sized in a pot. This is the tree almost nobody thinks to grow, and that is exactly why I love recommending it. A dwarf mulberry is self-fertile, astonishingly productive, and it begins fruiting young, dropping sweet berries over a long season rather than all at once. The reason store shelves never carry fresh mulberries is that they are far too soft to ship, which means the only way to taste them is to grow your own, and a pot on your patio puts them right at hand. They are tough, adaptable, and not fussy about much, which is why they suit a beginner so well. I grow mine in a large pot in full sun, keep the soil moist through the fruiting months, and simply pick berries as they ripen day after day. It asks little and gives constantly, and there is something deeply satisfying about eating a fruit that money genuinely cannot buy in most places. But now we arrive at number 1, and I need to tell you the story of how I stopped babying a tree and got the best harvest of my life. At number 1, I am coming back to the fig, because the fig hides the single most useful, most counterintuitive secret on this entire list. And it is the thing I promised you at the very beginning. For years, I did what everyone does. I kept moving my fig into bigger and bigger pots, giving its roots more and more room, certain that more space meant more fruit. And every year, I got a big leafy tree with barely any figs. Then I read the horticultural guidance from growers who have done this for generations, and it turned everything I believed upside down. A fig fruits best when its roots are restricted. When you keep a fig in a snug pot, a little root bound, the plant senses that it cannot spread forever, and that mild stress flips it out of leafy growth and into fruiting, pouring its energy into figs instead of foliage. The restriction is not cruelty. It is the trigger. This is a plant that has grown in cracks in stone walls and rocky ground for thousands of years, and confinement is exactly what tells it to reproduce. So here is what I do now, and what I want you to do. Choose a pot that feels almost too small, something in the 10 to 15 gallon range for a productive tree, and resist the urge to size up every year. Keep it in the hottest, sunniest place you have, because heat plus root restriction is the whole recipe. Water consistently while the figs are swelling, since a root-bound pot dries faster, and feed it during the growing season so the confined roots still have nutrition. Let the tree be a little crowded at the roots and generous in the sun, and it will hand you sweet, sun-warm figs that taste like nothing you can buy. The lesson hidden in that little tree is the lesson of this whole video. The fruit does not come from giving a plant everything. It comes from giving it exactly the right thing. And very often the right thing is less, not more, which is the opposite of what we are usually sold. That, in the end, is what all 15 of these trees have quietly taught me. Growing your own fruit was never about owning more land or working harder or spending more money on bigger and bigger things. It is about using the small space you have with intelligence, choosing plants that are built to thrive in a pot, and letting good drainage, good sun, and a little restraint do the work for you. You do not need an orchard. You need a few well-chosen pots, a sunny corner, and the patience to let one season teach you what the next will reward. The goal was never perfection. It is simply consistency. One tree, one pot, one honest handful of fruit at a time. If you are the kind of person who would rather grow something real and simple in the space you actually have than overspend and overwork for a garden that stresses you out, then you already belong here among us. So let me ask you again, and this time please actually type it out. Tell me in the comments the rough climate where you live and the one fruit you have always dreamed of picking from your own pot. Leave that comment now, because I read them and I often build entire videos around what you tell me. And if this way of growing more fruit with less fuss and less money is the way you want to live, then come along with us by subscribing, because we are a calm little community learning to grow more with less together. Next time I want to show you the one thing I add to every single pot on my patio in July that keeps the roots cool, cuts my watering nearly in half, and costs almost nothing. I will see you there. If you enjoyed this, I've got something for you. Inside the small plot circle, I continue right where we stopped, laying out the full dwarf potted orchard plan, tree by tree. You can ask me your own question, and I answer you myself. No bots. You belong here with fellow container gardeners already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. It's quick, and you can cancel any time with one click. Now that you've picked your trees, let me show you how to get twice the fruit from every pot. These 10 simple tips make all the difference, and that video is starting right here for you.